folks. It looks like we have hit 7. I know that folks may continue to trickle in as we get started, but in the interest of time and that this is a weeknight for folks, let's go ahead and kick it off. I'm going to hand the mic over to Jonathan Correa, our fearless leader and president of the GSC.
Hi, thank you, and welcome everybody to this event, Medievalists Beyond the Academy, hosted and organized by the Graduate Student Committee of the Medieval Academy of America. By the Graduate Student Committee, in this case, I really mean my colleague Kirsty Francis here, so all credit from our end goes to her, certainly. I just wanted to take a quick minute to talk to you about the Graduate Student Committee and what we do. Basically, we are a group of 6 graduate students that serve on this committee over a 2-year period. And we offer a number of services to medievalist graduates, to our worldwide community of medievalist graduate students, right? We have a quarterly newsletter in which we inform you about hot takes from conferences and events that might be of interest, as well as opportunities or conferences that we want to bring to your attention or we want to help you publicize. So definitely reach out to us if you need us to help spread the word on any initiative. This year, we've also been doing a running on series on professionalization in the digital age and alt-ac, what we call alt-ac, I guess, but I like Beyond the Academy much better. It's much punchier. So yeah, like definitely be informed on those aspects from our quarterly newsletter. We also organize mentoring programs that coincide with major medievalist conferences. And we pair graduate students with either faculty or other professionals that have medievalist training, such as librarians, museum curators, and all the beautiful tapestry that are the professional tracks that medievalists pursue these days. So definitely check out our mentoring program as well. And I'm going to drop links in the chat periodically. And also consider following us on Facebook and Twitter so you can keep up to date with things and listen to our exciting new podcast, which released last week, and it's going great. So yeah, we have good stuff coming for you and we want to bring it to your attention. So I'm going to drop a lot of links. And lastly, if many of you, I'm guessing, are members of the Medieval Academy already, but if not, consider joining. If you're graduate students, there are a number of funding opportunities for a wide variety of things available for graduate students that are up for grabs. I'm going to drop the link to the Medieval Academy website, and there you can just navigate to awards and students, and you will see a whole list of all the options that are available for you. So definitely consider checking those out and submit applications. These can change and can make projects become reality. So yeah, we're happy to help you out. And that's it from me. I'm going to pass the floor to Kirsty.
Awesome. Thank you, John. Yeah, this is my first year on the GSC, and I just found it has been an awesome way for me to learn more about the larger global medieval community, not just in America. So that's been really helpful. I want to emphasize one thing that John said, which is the beyond part of this, right? It's intentionally not meant to position careers outside of academia as alternate. Like, I'm currently, getting ready to go on the market. And yes, I'm interested in academic careers, but I'm equally, if not more so, interested in the type of work that our current panelists are doing. You guys have seen the flyer, so I won't take the time to introduce them now. Our moderator will introduce them as we continue. But just as an overview of what will happen in the next hour, we'll spend the first half an hour talking. Each panelist will share their kind of personal journey to their current position and offer any tips they have. Throughout, the chat will be open, so you're welcome to kind of jump in an effort to kind of keep the conversation going among our students. And additionally, we will then move to Q&A, which will be all chat-based in the interest of time. So you'll see at the bottom right of your Zoom screen Q&A, and that's a place where you'll be able to type in at any time your question during the panel. And then at the halfway point, we'll move to the Q&A section, which I'll take care of. But that's about it. I hope that's pretty straightforward for folks. I see that John has put in the chat lots of links. If you go to the Medieval Academy website, that's where you'll be able to find the information specifically about funding, for instance. That's under the GSC links on the website. All right, that brings me to welcoming and thanking especially Dr. Laura Morreale for all of her hard work in suggesting panelists and communicating with me over the past few months of putting this together. Dr. Morreale is a cultural historian of the 13th and 14th century Italian peninsula, whose interests in medieval French language writing extend to the Latin East. And she's very generously agreed to join us as our moderator today. Thank you so much, Laura. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Kirsty, and a special thank you to the Graduate Student Committee for inviting me today. I have to say that this has been a topic that has been of interest to me throughout my career, and I'm so pleased that we're to the point where we're really talking about this quite openly. One of our speakers, Jennifer Speed, and I were at graduate school together, and I think that she can back me up in saying that this is not a topic that came up very often. And so the fact that we are talking about it quite openly and thinking about it and looking to others who have trod this path before us, I think that's a really great step forward for all medievalists, because certainly medievalists who work in a lot of different areas can bring so much to the profession. And really, it sounds like I'm just saying that, but it's actually true. You can actually bring quite interesting perspectives and approaches to what we all care about. At this point, I don't really want to take up too much of your time, so I think we'll just go ahead and get started. And we'll start with my friend Jennifer Speed, who is a research development strategist at Princeton University, where she supports research teams of all sizes and in all disciplines in developing projects and securing large-scale research funding. So I'm going to pass it over to Jennifer.
So just a quick reminder, just give it an overview of what I do and how I came to this work. So yeah, I would say that so as Laura said, my job, the job I get paid for, is to help other people with their research, and specifically to help them find funding for it. So I am, in a way, I'm beyond the academy, that I don't earn my living focused on my own research. I am paid by Princeton University to work in research development. And being a medievalist has really prepared me well for that. When Laura and I were both at Fordham, Fordham encouraged its graduate students who wanted to study overseas to pursue their own funding. At the time, Fordham didn't have that. And so I started applying for grants and fellowships when I was a graduate student. And I draw on that work almost 20 years later, or maybe more than 20 years later. And I learned that having to describe your research to somebody else besides your mentor, besides your mom, besides your partner, has really big benefits. And asking to do it in ways you didn't necessarily expect, kind of like a personality test, responding to different questions. Why is it important? What happens if this work doesn't get done? What if you don't find what you're planning to do? That's really great in any field. And I talk through that with faculty members all the time as they are trying to decide how to approach an application. So just a little bit more about my path. I finished my PhD at Fordham, and I was part of what is often called a dual career couple. And so my husband was also an academic, and so I followed his career as we tried to decide what was best for our family. And I was able to pursue a position in research and in grant funding. And I did that at 2 different universities, but all along I was really committed to my own research. I did it in fits and starts, early mornings, late nights, only for me. I didn't do it because I needed to get tenure. I didn't need it because I need a particular kind of job. I continued to do it, and I still do it. And I've been able to secure some funding for it, some Mellon funding, some NEH funding, because I was able to do it, and it was really, really important to me. But my job didn't depend on it. And so, in some fields, it's really hard to do that kind of work. Sometimes it's impossible. But I found that with the stack of photocopies and digital images and access to a library, I can get my research done in a way that's still really satisfying to me. So that's a little bit about my journey. And I think that actually research development is a field that is all stages of helping people to pursue their research is really attractive to academics and to people with PhDs. You know how to do research, you know how to find things. And I would say, I said this in my cover letter when I was applying to Princeton, that having to negotiate with foreign archivists who don't really want to give you what you want in a language that you are not necessarily fluent in is a really good life skill, and how to be determined, how to try to get what you want, how to ask the question in a different way, and how to negotiate a really, really broad body of literature in order to help other people do their job. And so these skills that you have as a medievalist are immediately relevant to all kinds of fields that involve interdisciplinary learning and any kind of research. So I'll just leave that with you all.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. And I really am going to want to come back and pick up on that point about the joy that we all feel when we are able to pursue our own research in one way or another. I know that you and I have talked about that a lot, and I think others will feel that same way. Thank you. All right. Well, our next speaker is Anna Seebeck-Larsen. She's the director of the Russell Hope Robbins Library and Carlin Center, the University of Rochester's Medieval Studies Library, where she is the curator of medieval and early modern manuscripts and printed collections. So she's going to speak with us about her journey and about her perspective from where she sits. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks so much. And thanks again to Kirsty for organizing this. Like was said earlier, this wasn't something that was really talked about much when I was in graduate school. While I was in graduate school, and started to become more and more of a conversation, but certainly at that point, it was something that felt like it was the kind of thing that you wouldn't necessarily tell your advisor that you were going to panels like this, you know. So I'm really, really excited that this is something that that the MAA is doing. So thanks for that. So a little bit about my position and my path here. So I have my PhD in medieval studies from Notre Dame, and I realized kind of partway through my PhD that I was less and less interested in a tenure track faculty track and more interested in libraries, which was something that had always kind of been at the back of my head. The academic job market certainly, I would say, helped propel me in that direction, but I'll just put out there right now, it's not like the library job market is really fantastic itself. So that is just something to keep in mind. So when as I started thinking about this, I really intentionally looked for library positions that I could do while I was in graduate school. So I had a year in London and saw a volunteer position open at the Warburg to work on digital journals and also digitization. So I did that. And then when I returned to Notre Dame, I took on a position as a graduate student library worker at Notre Dame for Julia Schneider, who is the medieval studies librarian there. So on the one hand, all of that experience really helped. My own research and manuscript studies also really helped me prepare for this position. But then some of the other things that I think were really important were that I worked a lot with other graduate students and with faculty members to organize a lot of programming. So some of that involved getting grants to fund speaker series and that kind of thing. Part of it was working with others to organize a wide range of events. And so that collaboration, that budget management, that grant experience were really, really important in helping me secure the position that I have right now. I think also my teaching experience, I did quite a bit of teaching, and my research experience all play into what I do. So a little bit about my position. I am the Russell Hope Robbins Library is the non-circulating medieval studies library here at the University of Rochester. The Carlin Center part of our very long name is our non-circulating literary studies collection. And then those are research collections, so monographic collections along with unique and rare materials. And then I'm also the curator for our premodern collections up to, well, a date that really varies and is a subject of much discussion. So I do a lot of programming, I do research support, I do teaching, a very different kind of teaching than I did before. So I'm not teaching semester-long classes, I'm teaching library instruction sessions, mostly ones working with rare materials. I run a lot of workshops for graduate students, particularly focused on developing research skills, mostly geared toward medieval studies, but also broader workshops geared toward professionalization, those kinds of things. So I I really wear a lot of hats, and that is something that I think also doing a PhD can help prepare you for if you're looking for opportunities throughout your PhD to take on different kinds of projects and different kinds of opportunities, and having to juggle all of that, I think really helps prepare you for positions where you have to be able to kind of shuffle your priorities really, really quickly, I guess I would say. I'm looking through this list of questions that was sent ahead of time. I'm just trying to think about the best one to go. So a question that I get asked a lot is how to advise current graduate students who are interested in going into libraries. I think that libraries for medievalists are often like, faculty members will tell their students, oh, you could always go into libraries. And I want to say you can't just always go into libraries. So it is something where I would certainly encourage you to seek out experience working in libraries. I certainly would encourage, and this is a really touchy subject, I would think seriously about getting a library science degree. It certainly gives you skills that you don't pick up during your PhD. And I'm saying this as somebody who doesn't have one. At the same time, it is also a lot of money. And so, but it will help smooth the road into moving into libraries, certainly. Contact your librarians, ask if they have positions and projects that you can work on. Along with that, work with your department to see if they offer funding to help support you, because the library might not have the funds to pay you for the work that you're hoping to do. So you could do library specific projects. So that could be manuscript descriptions, it could be archival work, but it could also be collection management, programming, outreach, teaching, all of those kinds of things play into libraries. And I think the other thing that I would want to say about moving into libraries is that as medievalists, a lot of the time we think about special collections as the pathway into library careers, but there's a whole range of things that you can do. And so certainly talk to your librarians, your archivists who are at your institutions to talk about what those different careers might look like. As I said, any programming experience, budget experience that you can get is going to be extremely helpful. Project management, collaboration with other people, and digital tools and experience is a huge one. So anything that you can get along those lines is going to help you pursue a career in this area. So I'll stop there. I have all kinds of other things that I can say, but we'll save that for the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Anna. And I'm so glad that you mentioned digital. I do think that that is a place where there's a lot of growth, and and to tell you the truth, medievalists are, kind of good at it. I mean, many of them are. But also I think that your comments about getting experience and being aware of the experience that you're getting is fantastic, and learning how to name what that experience is. So thank you so much for that. Our next speaker is Ross Carlin. He's currently an educator in world languages and cultures at Geffen Academy at UCLA, and he teaches Spanish language, literature, and art history classes at the secondary level. Thank you, Ross, and I'm interested to hear what you have to say.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you, Kirsty, and the MAA and the GSC. I'm really excited to be here because I am a very recent PhD. I finished in February of 2020. And we all know what happened March 2020. So yeah, it was an interesting ride for me. On the job market, coming right out of the PhD, I was, looking mainly at academic jobs. And in full disclosure, right, was disappointed at where that was going in terms of my own performance on the market, and getting the interviews and never hearing back or never hearing anything at all, right? It's this frustrating experience. So I knew I needed some sort of change and needed to be realistic with myself. The other thing that was huge for me in terms of my journey into secondary education was geographic flexibility and being close to family. My family is here in Southern California, and that was important for me, right? To have that sort of flexibility. So I ended up applying to independent schools, both on my own and through an independent school headhunter, which I highly recommend, and we can talk about that in the Q&A, and I'll put it in the chat as well, that work with a lot of PhDs, recent PhDs who are looking to expand beyond beyond just the tenure track academic jobs. So yeah, what does my position look like? I teach at the secondary level. I am currently this year teaching Spanish language classes. My PhD is in Spanish and Portuguese, and my area of research was the 14th and 15th century, predominantly Portuguese literature and visual culture, book history, stuff like that. So I teach Spanish language classes. I'm also teaching a history, literature, culture, and art of Spain, where we did deep dives into medieval texts. And I had, 8th graders that were reading 15th century Spanish flawlessly, right? So that was like awesome. Next year, I'm teaching an intro art history class. I'll be teaching an advanced topics class in Spanish literature, mostly focusing on pre-modern. So there's a lot of flexibility that comes with a secondary teaching experience that I don't think, that I didn't necessarily know about, and people don't necessarily tell you. I do publish, I'm actively engaged in my scholarship. I'm working on an edited volume right now with a colleague actually in libraries. So we're doing an edited volume on book history in the Iberian Peninsula. So, all those opportunities are there. I also work at an institution that's university affiliated, right down the street from where Kirsty is. So I do have the advantages of having UCLA's libraries, UCLA's resources, all at my fingertips. I like to say I'm basically like a UCLA lecturer, but my students are a little bit smaller, if that helps. And then I think the question that really stuck out to me in terms of the questions that Kirsty had given us to prepare is like, what was the advice? The advice that I never got in graduate school explicitly, with the exception of my director directly, and then a few friends and colleagues, one of whom is here on this panel with me, is you are your own top priority, right? And like, you are what makes the most of you. That's really it. And, being realistic about the state of the world and life, right? I think I was sitting having coffee with a colleague, and she was the one that told me, she's like, you have to be realistic about your life and your world. That means the market, that means like the positive things in your life, right? Like family, friends, partners, significant others, anything like that. And, looking at how academia is changing. At Geffen Academy, I work with at least 20 other PhDs, most of whom are active scholars as well. So the bubble is expanding, right? To secondary schools, to libraries, to community colleges, and that to independent scholars, museums, art foundations, things like that. So seeing the state of that expansion really helped me wrap around sort of like what those possibilities are. So yeah, I'm going to leave that there because I know with question and answer, we're going to expand a lot more, but thank you.
Thank you, Ross. And I really do appreciate your mentioning that, relationships are important. It's sad to think about people who think they have to do this alone. So I really appreciate you bringing that up. Our last speaker is Rachel Roussard, who received her PhD in musicology from the University of Maryland, College Park in August of 2021, so also a recent grad. And she completed a dissertation that focused on women's voices in an early 14th century trouvère chansonnier from the Lorraine region of France. So we're going to turn it over to Rachel. Thanks very much, Rachel.
Thank you very much, Laura and Kirsty, and to the rest of my panelists. I'm very honored to speak alongside you today, and very, very grateful to be here. So like Laura said, I'm a musicologist by training with specialty in medieval musical traditions. And so my full-time job is working as a project editor in the humanities at Oxford University Press. I'm very lucky because while I'm technically based outside of the New York City office, out of that office, I do work 100% remote. And that's one kind of bright spot that has come out of this terrible situation that we've been going through since 2020, is that a lot of publishing houses are willing to and are looking to hire remote employees. So that's one thing I've been able to do, and I think is a really positive change for that. And so to give you an idea of what I do, so I work on the content development side of book publishing. And so my role as a project editor is essentially a project manager, where the projects that I'm handling are the academic books. And so that usually involves monographs, but also edited volumes, handbooks, and occasionally practitioner texts. My role is also a fairly independent one, because I'm considered, the point person for particular books, and day to day that's communicating a lot with authors who are very often full professors themselves. So very much building a relationship with academics in that way, as well as communicating with all of the teams at Oxford in acquisitions, production, design, marketing. So a lot of communication is involved pretty heavily. I monitor deadlines for projects. I also assess and review manuscripts and then deliver them to production to move them toward publication. And also, in addition to my full-time job as a project editor, I do teach one course at a local college, at Haverford College, in their music department as a visiting professor. So a little bit about how I got here. As Laura said, I graduated in August of last year. I defended my dissertation in June of 2021. And I only entered into this role in January of this year. So it's been 2 months. So my story is still a relatively new one, but I hope I can provide a little insight into what first happens after graduating, and that experience similar to Ross's story. And so when I graduated last year, I also was fairly confident I did not want to immediately pursue a tenure track faculty position. To me, what was most invigorating about academia was hearing about other scholars' work and supporting and amplifying the work of my peers. And while teaching was something I enjoyed, I didn't know that that was what I truly wanted to do full time. And as we've said, the academic job market was also pretty disheartening at the time. And I wanted to find another way to work alongside the academy or adjacent to, parallel in some way. And so academic publishing was a path that materialized quite early for me in that thought process. But I had no direct experience in publishing at the time. I figured I had to find some kind of and that would take a couple years. So then when I started to apply for jobs, I spread a pretty wide net. I sent out my CV and teaching portfolio to a number of colleges in the area to ask for open adjunct positions. I did apply to a handful of positions at archives, those that did not require a master's in library science, and also to entry-level positions in publishing, both trade and academic publishing. I also spent a brief time working with a search firm that would place candidates with advanced degrees in secondary schools. So it was definitely an option I explored. And I also spent a few months working at Whole Foods as well. And I think that's something that is worth mentioning. It's not on my CV, but it was an important experience for me, and is a part of my story. And so I'm very happy to acknowledge that. It was a very positive experience. I secured my teaching job at Haverford College in the fall, mid-fall. And even though I had accepted that, I continued to search for additional work. And so that's when I saw the posting for the project editor position in about mid-November of last year. And I didn't want to let the opportunity pass. I thought I might go in and get some interview experience, just sort of get in front of some of the interviewers and have that experience and build on that for future opportunities. And I found out quite quickly that things move very quickly in publishing. I was contacted in December, had 2 interviews within a week, and the first week in January received the offer for the job. And so since then, I've been working quite happily there and learning very quickly on the job. But one thing I was thinking about heading into this, that one of the questions of Kirsty's was how my background as a PhD and as a medievalist kind of helped prepare me for this job. And I sort of went back and read my cover letter and found that in my application materials and also in the interview, I felt I was really able to pitch my training as a PhD as having prepared me for that role was one of the things I talked very much about was my organizational abilities. As being a PhD student and candidate, you're proposing, you're planning, you're executing, handing off numerous research projects, long-term, short-term, and often with minimal oversight. Also activities including teaching, applying for grants, fellowships, leadership positions, all of these sort of give you organizational and management skills that transfer over remarkably well to a position like the project editor one, which, as I said, kind of involves managing many projects in various stages of the publication process. And so I also communicate with a network of other teams who are completing many intersecting tasks for a particular project. And so having done a number of project management tasks in my PhD time, that really has prepared me for this. As a medievalist, what I thought of very immediately was I was able to emphasize my interdisciplinary knowledge base and adaptability for this role, because the project editor in the humanities works across all of the humanities. And so I kind of need to have a basic knowledge of how research is conducted in general, presented in a variety of fields. As a medievalist, I was exposed to a diversity of methods and many of the disciplines, including philosophy, classics, musicology, history, literary studies, religious studies, it goes on. And now as a project editor, I'm taking on projects in these fields. And because of my background as a medievalist, I can approach them with an existing level of familiarity, or at the very least, an adaptability to the different methods and approaches and general knowledge base there. So I'll leave that there. I'm happy to talk about more of all that I've shared and answer questions, but I know I'm like Ross, I'm not far from where many PhD students who might be listening are right now. So I want to help demystify this process in any way that I can. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Rachel. That was really brilliant. And not only were you demystifying that process of job hunting and finding, but also I'm still a little mystified about how academic publishing works. So really, thank you for that. Every time I can learn more, I'm thrilled to learn more. But that was really great. And I'm glad that we have sort of people who are recently graduated and those folks who have graduated a little earlier, because that shows sort of different stages of their various careers. So at this point, I believe that we're ready to take questions from the audience. Kirsty, did you want to start with the questions that are already in the queue at this point?
Did you want to kick us off with that question for the MMAA, kind of thinking about larger support, or did you want to save that for the close?
Absolutely, I will start that off, and then we'll get to the questions from the audience. Because I've been working as I mentioned for a while with the Medieval Academy on thinking about how we need to be welcoming of medievalists of all professional standings. I did want to just sort of pose the question to the four of you about some of the barriers that you find in feeling like a member of our intellectual community of medievalists. And I say that not to down the academy, but rather because it's a point at which we're really working to open it up as much as possible. And also because I think that people in the audience might want to be aware of some of the barriers or some of the things that they have to think of in advance and how they might position themselves if they do actually want to remain part of this community, as I'm sure many do. So I'll just put that question out there. What are the things that are perhaps keeping you from feeling that you're a full participant? It's my to-do list. One of the things, of course, is library access. That is one of the main people. And now it seems that none of you particularly have that issue. But for a lot of independent, Anna?
I don't have issue with library access, but right. I do have some thoughts about the library piece of it, if I can jump in, which I already did. But I was thinking about this question, and one of the things that I was thinking about was, yes, helping with library access, absolutely. Expanding library access, maybe also putting people in touch with with people who work at libraries who are willing to help facilitate access as well. I think that the JSTOR access that the MAA helps facilitate is great. But the other thing I was thinking, and one thing that I should also, that I completely forgot to mention that is a huge part of my job, is the Middle English text series, which is published by the Robbins Library. And we have a lot of other open access digital projects. So I was thinking that it might also be really useful if the MAA would sponsor panels and workshops on both, not just how to publish, but also on understanding the publishing industry, and also on understanding why open access is important. Because I think that the MAA helping advocate for increasing open access publications, working with publishers and libraries to provide these, will also help people understand what avenues are out there, and also will help them understand why they at their own institutions, if they're in a position to do so, should also be supporting open access initiatives on the part of their institutions. So there's a whole lot that we can unpack around that. But that's one thing that I was trying to think, like, what could I say that hasn't been said a million times already? And that's one thing that I think would actually be a really powerful thing for the MAA to do, to really come out swinging in support of open access. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Other responses? If not, there's a huge queue of questions that are not mine. So
this is something that we can, if you guys have thoughts on this as we move on, our inboxes are open. Like, please do share that with us. We're really interested in thinking about ways that we can improve our programming. We have several questions in the Q&A, and so I think, assuming that I'm not seeing anyone diving in to jump with more comments, I kind of move us over to that. As a reminder, if you haven't already found the Q&A section, it's in the bottom right of your Zoom screen. Our first question is for Ross. Ross, what drew you to private and independent school teaching versus teaching in the public school system?
Yeah, so that's a good question. The most basic answer I have for that is certifications, right? To teach in most public school systems, you do need a teaching license or a teaching certification. I did not have that. I was coming fresh out of a PhD. So I looked at, for those options at private and independent schools. The more sort of like lofty answer, I guess we could say, which is that, I was looking for something that more reflected the communities that I was leaving. And the independent schools. And I think this is also addressing another question about sort of PhDs looking for PhDs to teach at secondary schools. Like, there's a huge push right now for secondary schools, especially top private schools, to bring in PhD educators. And I'm sorry, there's a helicopter right outside my window. If anyone hears that, that's annoying. To bring in PhD educators. So I found that in the independent school space, I was looking at people and talking with people that felt very much like me and like the experiences that I had in graduate school, and understood sort of what that meant. We had a similar style of teaching, we had a similar style of engaging with scholarship and engaging with our materials. So in part, it was like a technical thing, and that I didn't have the certification, but also because, and I alluded to this before, right, this expanding bubble of the academy, that's definitely hitting independent schools right now, especially, sort of, and I don't mean to sound like pretentious in this way, but like when we think of like the elite private schools, right, around America, there's this huge push for people like us. So yeah.
We have two questions kind of in the same vein, so I'm going to jump ahead to kind of group them together, and I'm going to group these together actually themselves. One is, could someone speak to a little bit more on the clearinghouses looking for PhDs to teach at secondary schools? And so Ross and Rachel, you guys both alluded to that process. Maybe you guys could tackle that, as well as this other question for us, which you just kind of spoke to, but was an education degree of some sort necessary to obtain a position? Do you know, well, it sounds like, do you know if there are a general requirement for PhD or MA graduates looking into secondary schools? It sounds like perhaps you've already answered that. The answer is not for independent schools, but yes for public schools.
Correct, yeah. So, and I'll let Rachel take the other one too, because I sort of alluded to that as well. But just to answer this one quickly, yes. So PhDs and MAs in subject fields are fine for private and independent schools. You do need a teaching certification or master's in education or something else, to my knowledge, in most public school districts. So, yeah.
Thank you. So Rachel, maybe you could talk a little bit about your experience with that headhunter process.
Sure. Yeah. So I only spent a very brief window of time working with them, but I think I dug up the name after that was asked. So it was Carney, Sando and Associates. And after I'm finished speaking, I can type that in the chat. But so I was actually led to them by a fellow recent PhD graduate friend of mine who had sought them out. And so she basically connected me with this firm who, as she explained to me, were looking to place PhDs, just like Ross explained, in charter and independent schools that were really looking for that level and that approach to education. And so I pretty much, I had an interview with one of the associates, basically laying out my intentions, what I was looking for, and as well sort of like sharing my experience and what I was prepared to kind of offer, because I would have looked to teach maybe not specifically music, but history or literature, and then also participate in extracurriculars. They like to know if you're willing to participate as a club leader or anything like that. So I was thinking like a music club would be really fantastic to be part of, or getting involved in some of the ensembles would be something I'd be interested in. So basically just having a chat with one of them there to establish what I was looking for. And then they kind of set up a profile for me to then kind of pair me with schools, because schools would just approach the firm directly. They usually would not be posting on public job sites. They would be approaching this firm to seek candidates for their roles, and then they would see if I was a good fit given my CV, my experience and interests, and then kind of pair us together. I never got that far, but that was how it was explained to me it would work. And my friend had a couple of positive experiences with that sort of process. So that was my experience with it. And honestly, the company was really, really friendly and open and really great to work with. So, but they sort of agree with you that, yes, we think you're a great candidate and we want to help you find a job. So, and I'm happy to put that name in the chat as well.
I'll jump in too here, because I put it in the chat, Rachel, because I also worked with Carney Sando for a while. The job I have now is the one job that wasn't through Carney Sando, but yeah, just a second, that they are a great team. They are some of the most helpful and insightful people that you can work with if secondary school is a path for you. They're great to just like talk about all the different directions of, even like it's down to like selling yourself as a secondary school teacher. So yeah, they're great.
Awesome. That's something, I mean, anecdotally, I am not a panelist, but that is something that I have heard a lot of my colleagues this year having success on the job market have, also gone through the headhunting process. So thank you guys so much for dropping that in the chat. We have a question. Does anyone have experience? And if you don't, this is something I'm going to mentally note for our next panel. Does anyone have any experience with media consultancy? Is that something that anyone has encountered in their work as a medievalist beyond the academy? Okay. All right. I am so sorry, Alice, that we cannot be more helpful in that question, but this gives me a great thought and target to aim to answer in the future. Laura, did you have anything to say? Sure.
No, Ross, did you have something to say?
So if by media consultancy, we're talking about like a area specialist for media, television, film, stuff like that, I think I'm not sure if that's where the question is going. I know people who have done it. I know that it's a little complicated, but so the end, yeah, yes, it is. Yeah. All I know is it's typically very hard to break in. The only job that I didn't apply to that was in that is video game companies sometimes look for medieval specialists. There was a job at Sony Video Games that I did not end up applying to, but that I don't have much info on that.
This is something I can actually share about because I have done some of this video consulting work. I forgot that I was like, I'm not a panelist. I'll just say it is really hard to get. It is all networking. It is all from, I'm doing Ubisoft. I'm working for Ubisoft right now. Actually, I'm their medieval consultant, as is one of my friends from UCLA now. But basically the way I found it was word of mouth, was like a friend of a friend saw a post on like editors and artists in Los Angeles, a Facebook group, and was saying, I need a medieval scholar to give advice. Does anyone have any contacts? So really unhelpful. But I think that, you know, what Ross was pointing out is a great point, is that it's like there may occasionally be references. What Anne is putting in the chat is that it's gig to gig, but my experience in talking about like, how could I make this into a career? Because that's what I've talked to these video game folks about. The advice was, see if you can pitch yourself to a whole bunch of companies and get together like a freelance clientele that you'd be working with, as opposed to getting hired by a single company as their like go-to medievalist. But I will keep thinking about that. And Alice, I'll see if I can get someone for our next version of this panel next year to represent that group. Thank you for asking that question. All right, we have another question here. How did your medieval languages create barriers or opportunities beyond the academy? This person feels like they've created an extremely interdisciplinary profile, but watering down their language specialization has made them a confusing job candidate.
Languages equal good mostly in my world, but I could see that how that might be problematic.
I would say, not knowing more about the particular challenges, and I hate to think anybody watered down their language skills, but I think it's not just language skills. It's not just about content. It's about ways of thinking. And when you navigate a business environment or an academic environment, I talk to biologists who think differently than engineers, who think differently than linguists. The ability to know and understand and navigate languages is the ability to navigate ways of seeing and knowing and learning. And I think if you are able to position yourself as someone who's able to essentially think in completely different environments with different approaches, that really prepares you to be adaptable, to see things in a different way. And so I think to shy away from that seems like a tragedy. So that's my comment without knowing a little bit more about the particular job or the situation.
Yeah, I'd love to add to that. I really like that, Jennifer. I think that one of the most important things to learn when you're looking for positions outside of tenure track positions is how to talk about the skills that you have in a way that makes sense for the positions that you're looking at. And this is something that everyone else has touched on, but I found that working with, for example, the graduate school at my institution had a career counselor who was specifically for like humanities and social sciences PhDs. So working with them was really helpful to figure out how to articulate those particular skills in a way that made sense for the positions that I had. Obviously, medieval language skills are really useful in my current position. But when I was looking for jobs, as I was thinking about what was most important to me, it was also things like health insurance and a stable paycheck and like living in a place where I wanted to live. And so I was also looking at a whole range of positions, and I was offered a position at Epic Consulting, which is a big healthcare software place up in Madison that hires a lot of humanities PhDs. And for those interviews, I talked about my language skills, not in terms of, oh, hey, I know Latin, but in terms of I have the ability to learn things. And like Jennifer was saying, to be adaptable and to tackle difficult tasks and difficult concepts, and to hold all of these different things in my head at the same time. And I think that that's a useful way of framing things, especially if you're trying to move into a different kind of profession and you're trying to say, look, I have the ability to grasp all of these complicated ideas, and I can pick up on all of these difficult skills. So it's less about can my expertise in Old Norse, get me that job or keep me from that job, but more, how do I talk about how the experience of having that makes me qualified for this job that I'm applying for?
Those are great thoughts. Thank you. We have a lot of questions, so I'm going to keep trucking, but feel free to continue answering them in the chat if you have other thoughts that you want to share. We have an anonymous question. How are we feeling in our current jobs? Are you guys feeling fully happy and satisfied? We're getting really deep right now. Or are you feeling like you're kind of missing something? I know many of you still have like a foot in academia in some way. So maybe you guys could speak to that kind of experience or that connection or lack thereof.
I might go first, just because this is something I've been thinking about in the last few days and weeks since I've just recently made this change. And I would lie if I said that I didn't think to myself, have I made the right choice? Is this a mistake? Be fully honest about that, it's happened. But I think that one thing that I've already appreciated so far about my job is that for me, it has the best parts of academia that I personally loved, which was, interacting with scholars, amplifying people's work that I think is worth bringing attention to. And so I've really focused on those things, and, that'll look different for anybody, why you went into academia and what you can turn that into on the other side. And so it's a work in progress for me because I'm so early, but I would say, yes, I'm very satisfied. And I think also, it's worth pointing out, I don't know what's going to happen in the future. Maybe 10 years down the line, I want to shift again and get slightly closer to academia. But I think I feel very comfortable right now being academia parallel. I'm still very much communicating with that world. And part of this next year is me trying to fit research and publishing of my own work into my life. And that's something that I'm looking forward to exploring now that I've had a year between me and my dissertation defense and had a chance to recover from that. But the idea that I don't know what the future holds, and what I'm doing right now makes me genuinely happy. And so that's what I'll say to it, but it's a work in progress and not 100% confidence every day.
Do any of the other panelists have a thought they'd like to share, or shall I continue?
Well, I would just say, I work at a really well-known institution, Princeton University, and I'm really fortunate to be at a place that values scholarship, that values education. But I think if I weren't at Princeton, I would be at a university. Universities are flawed. They've changed in ways that people don't always appreciate, but people have been complaining about universities for about 700 years and how students don't read the things that they're supposed to, and they don't take care of their books, and it costs too much. And I think that universities around the world are agents of change, and they change people's lives through their education, through the research that they generate, forming communities of people who care about each other. The relationships that you form in college sometimes take you through the rest of your life. And so if I weren't working at Princeton, I would be working at a university somewhere. And I think that there are a lot of people who think maybe this isn't the university. If if I looked at all the 4,400 universities in the United States of America, this is the one I picked, the one that I'm working at now. But I think a lot of people do still really deeply believe in universities as a place to make your career and a place to change the world. So don't give up on that. There's lots of ways to work in a university. If you believe in that, that is not necessarily a full-time tenure track or some other kind of teaching position. There's lots of ways to participate in the enterprise of higher ed.
Thank you for that. Oh,
no, I was just going to chime in with the secondary perspective too. I mean, I love it. I find teaching secondary school to be one of the most fulfilling and rewarding experiences. I loved teaching in graduate school. I love being in a classroom. And you just have these amazing moments. I find that we get so preoccupied as PhD students with like the age of our students. I have 8th graders who have made, infinitely deeper comments in class and ask better questions and think on a different level than some of my undergrads did when I was teaching in grad school. So don't let age of your students get in the way of thinking that you can't engage on these levels or do anything like that. I find it extremely rewarding, and I love them. Like my students are incredible.
Thank you. As we continue, I just want to let our panelists know that if you guys see Q&A questions that are directed to you that you're like, I don't need to answer this out loud, I can just type a quick answer, please feel free to type that. I will not answer those questions then. I'm going to kind of go more for the broad ones, unless I see that you didn't answer it. We have a question. How has your relationship to your work-life balance changed since leaving graduate school or the academy in general? How deliberate were you about that transition? It's a great question.
I'll jump in here. So it hasn't changed as much as I hoped that it would. Just put that out there. It's an issue. It's something that I'm working on. I guess I would say though that I feel much more comfortable putting an out of office message on my email and walking away. But at the same time, I still, and part of it is just my job. I still work more than I wish that I did. So that's something that I'm actively working on. I wish I had a more optimistic answer to that one, but so.
I'm the opposite. My 5 p.m. laptop's closed. My students know if you email me at 9:30 p.m. about the quiz tomorrow, I will not get back to you until 8 a.m. the next morning. My school also has a really interesting schedule where we start at 9 as opposed to earlier, like our peer institutions. So it is like 9 to 4. I get home, maybe do a couple emails, and then I'm done. And I find that was mind blowing to me. That was truly mind blowing.
The idea of not having homework is really amazing. Great. Folks are really dropping in the chat now. So I'm going to kind of keep moving. See, Rachel, you're typing an answer. So I'm going to skip that question. Did anyone have experiences? I'll kind of ask this more generally before we even get into it. Did anyone interview with jobs in commerce, tech, journalism? For instance, not to call you out again, Anna, but you just mentioned Epic earlier, and I know that that's kind of a tech firm. Did anyone have any experiences to share related to that, or kind of those were not part of your job search, so that is not something you can speak to?
I can speak to it a little bit more, but I also want to jump in and say that I accidentally moved a question from the Q&A. I accidentally said that it was answered. So I'm really sorry about the salary question. I did not answer it, but I want to answer it. So that particular job interview with Epic was, it was a lot like something that, it was multi-stage. It was do tests at home, I think there was some IQ test. It was very odd. And then there were multiple stages that I had to do at home. And then they actually took me to Madison, and I did a full day's worth of various interviewing and meeting with different groups and talking about, it actually was a lot about talking about my approach to teaching. And so I think it really depends on the kind of position that you're applying to. But I will say that because Rachel mentioned how much more quickly publishing moves, if you're looking into those kinds of jobs, just be aware that generally speaking, the hiring is much faster than the almost year-long slog that is the academic job market. So yeah. I'm happy to talk more specifically about my experiences with Epic, maybe in chat or something like that. So
I think that answer actually also answered a question at the bottom of Q&A, which was someone asking, is it okay to wait until after defense to start applying for jobs? And it sounds like, at least from what Anna was just sharing and what Rachel was sharing, was that these jobs, because they move so fast, it's so unlike the academic job market, you will be much better positioned after you defend. So it sounds like anonymous person who's stressed, you're in the right boat. Don't worry, you've actually been planning this perfectly the whole time for these types of careers. So I'm going to ask the question that was moved to the answered, no big deal. It is a sensitive question, totally fine if you don't feel comfortable, but folks were interested in hearing, you know, now that you've transitioned out of the PhD, and I know that some of us are at the entry level and some of us have kind of moved further along, but are folks able to share kind of a salary range that they're currently making so that folks can get a sense of what that even looks like financially? And it's fair to pass if you are not comfortable.
So I'll jump in because I am the one who said that I was trying to answer this and I don't want to put anyone else on the spot. What I was actually going to do was share the ARL puts out a report about salaries in ARL libraries. And
could you define ARL?
Yeah, so it's the Association for Research Libraries. So it's the data in it is it's not representative of all libraries because it only reflects research libraries that belong to ARL. So it doesn't reflect academic libraries that are not part of ALL, and it doesn't reflect public libraries. It has a breakdown across roles and across ranges. So I'm actually happy to send that to anybody who wants it, because I think that that might be actually a really useful thing for people to have. So you can buy it on their website, but I just realized this is going on YouTube. I'll send it to you for free. So yeah.
I don't feel comfortable sharing my salary for reasons that we don't need to discuss, but I'm kind of a pirate in looking at salaries if it's relevant for something that I'm working on. And in many state institutions, everyone's salary is public information. So if there's somebody you're wondering about, an assistant librarian and a lecturer in the history department, again, many states, their higher education salaries are available completely online. They may be a year behind. So just dig around, find a university, find someone in a position that you think you might be interested in, and look up their salary. So because sometimes I've helped to do jobs and we need to decide on a salary, look at what's competitive. That's a great way to learn what people's salaries are right here and now.
Ross or Rachel? It's okay to say pass. I'm not going to be offended. Although now I'm like, Ross, you're a UCLA employee. I'm going to go track you down. Thank you. I did that with all of my faculty members. So yeah.
I will say not a specific number, but compared to what I made as a teaching assistant and a PhD candidate, is over twice what I made at my best. So
nice.
It was a nice leap up, for me. So it gets better in that direction.
Great.
I will echo that too. Secondary education, especially at independent schools, is a nice bump compared to an academic job that I was a finalist for that they told me the salary for in Los Angeles at a large metropolitan area. I'll leave that there to be diplomatic.
Since I am not someone who's employed in this, I can share that a friend recently got an offer from an independent school in a metropolitan area like Los Angeles for $90,000 as a PhD. So I don't know if that is relevant to other people's experience, but when I have been talking about like that is kind of a number that I've heard as a benchmark that is not unrealistic for especially like big independent schools. Alrighty, so we're gonna keep moving. This is a really quick answer. Do any folks call yourself, like when you're pitching yourself, do you consider yourself or pitch yourself as a PhD candidate when you're looking for jobs, or a PhD person, or do you say that you're a researcher? How do you sell yourself, especially when you're in between that position of like, I'm a graduate student versus I am kind of hanging out waiting for someone to employ me?
I had this experience when I was still working on my PhD. I got this weird illness and I was going to doctor after doctor, and like, they say, what do you do? And if you say you're a graduate student, they sort of look at you like you're just not quite a person. And at some point, I just like through the middle of that year-long process, I decided to say I'm a historian, and it completely changed the conversation. So don't call yourself a graduate student, call yourself call yourself a researcher, call yourself a historian, call yourself an editor, anything that is an accurate reflection, because again, graduate student sounds like you're just on your way to someplace else and you don't have an identity as what you are. So if that's comfortable, I highly recommend it. It worked beautifully for me. It was accurate. And I really felt like it just changed the conversation of, when I interacted with people, a whole range of circumstances.
I suppose I would just second that. I don't have a specific scenario, but I think going forward, I would refer to myself as, if I were going for another publishing job, obviously I'd consider myself a project editor or an assistant editor. But if I were looking at more of something else, would probably call myself a musicologist. So I definitely agree with Jennifer there.
The UCLA Career Center advised us to say that we are researchers of our particular field. So that is some unsolicited advice. May or may not be helpful. Let's see. Here's a question about the future, you guys. We have about 10 minutes left. What do you think the future of the academy is? Do you think that the job market is going to have a boom as faculty begin to retire, or is the future more bleak? This is a good question, and also a sad question.
When I was a graduate student, sort of the middle of my master's degree, more than almost 25 years ago, people were hoping for that then. Oh, there's going to be a lot of retirements any day now. It's going to open up the field. It hasn't happened. It may not happen, but the academy is not going anywhere. There's like I said, there's more than 4,000 universities in the United States of America alone. Academic institutions are critical. They're going to change their shape, they're going to change their emphasis, but they're not going to go away. So don't lose hope. If you want to roll in academia at the university in some way, there are going to be positions, and there will be ways to serve and to be part of that if you want to do that.
Other predictions?
I don't think there's going to be a boom. I'm a big champion of the academy is changing and the bubble is expanding. I know I keep saying that. In my field, well, we're all in the same field, but in world language or modern languages and things like that, there's a huge push to shift out of tenure track and eliminate tenure entirely. So there's a lot more positions that are assistant professor of teaching or instructional assistant professors, things like that. So I think that the verbiage and how things will look is going to be changing. And I think that certain things like that will expand. I think that community colleges, secondary independent schools, museums, libraries, all those positions are going to become more a part of these sorts of academic spaces. I just think everything's going to look different. I'm not sure there's going to be a boom of tenure track jobs of people who are leaving or retiring or whatever. So.
I agree with that. I just want to say really quickly though, sorry, Kirsty, I interrupted you. I also agree that while the academy will continue, there will continue to be this shift toward non-tenure track positions, toward temporary positions, toward adjunct positions, and it's going to be the same in libraries and in museums and other GLAMs. I mean, it already is the case that they rely heavily on contract labor themselves. And so this gets back to the very first question about what the MAA can do. And I think that maybe the MAA advocating even more strongly for the preservation of tenure track positions, and also as well as advocating for expanding the bubble and providing for support for people who don't pursue tenure track careers, and look and advocating for ways in which those positions can also be well-paid permanent positions, so basically like advocating for better working conditions and permanent positions for people across all of these fields, I think would be a really good way to go. So
thank you. I see that Jennifer is responding to her direct question. I see that we also have a question from Adam where maybe folks could just share in the chat if they have websites that they thought were particularly useful for everything. And then I'm going to actually couple these final two questions because they seem like they go kind of hand in hand, two sides of a similar issue. I think this is a good place for us to end today. For those of you who work at universities, on the one hand, have you experienced much prejudice or snobbery from faculty because you are staff? I've heard from friends who work in libraries and academic administration that this can be a real frustration. On the other hand, another big anxiety that a lot of us as job seekers face is appearing overqualified, right? Like an employer saying, oh, they wouldn't do this job because they have a PhD. Have any of you experienced pushback from employers for possessing a doctorate, like in an interview? And if so, how did you address that? So kind of the overqualified versus not respected conundrum of being a PhD outside of being a faculty member, right? It's kind of, what type of experience have you guys had in that regard?
I've had good experience, but I have definitely run into people who are jerks, and it's not because they're faculty members, it's because they're jerks and they happen to be faculty members. So that's just really important to keep in mind, that you will find people like that in any field. And you have to remember that that may be their personality, and it's not really because you're a staff person and they're a faculty member. So I mean, I really am an optimist. That maybe doesn't sound like it, but again, there'll be people like that everywhere, and you just have to feel confident that that if a university has hired you, they think that you have an important job to do and they're putting money behind it. And a faculty member who has a chip on his or her shoulder is not going to change that. Universities are large, complex places, and they need everyone from the grounds crew to dining services to instructional staff to, you know, the people who replace the electrical socket. So everybody's part of the system. And just remember that if you encounter someone who is like that, and you don't have to put up with it, you know, there are ways to address that.
Yeah, just to build off of Jennifer's final point, it's certainly something that I encounter more often than I would like. But again, I think remembering that it's not something that you have to put up with, that, you know, you are a professional as well, and that your skills are important and they're valuable, and really kind of grounding yourself in that, I think, is really, really vital, and setting boundaries with those people. I think this is useful no matter what career you end up in. If you have a lot of encounters with somebody who's a jerk, like, set up boundaries so for that person, you know, and don't engage with them if they're mistreating you. I will say for the question about PhDs, I think that it's a little bit different from my field, in that I think that more often, if you have a PhD but you don't have the library degree, there might be some suspicion that you are looking for this job and that you will then leave. So I think that, and this is something that I answered in the Q&A, I think that for that particular spin, I think just being able to show and articulate that this is a career that you're really you know, committed to and interested in. It's not kind of like a, oh, I just figured I'd do this because, you know, job market's really bad, you know, so being able to show that you understand that this profession is a different profession than the one that you might have trained for, and that it has its own standards and its own practices, and that's something that you really support and value.
I want to absolutely support what Anna just said. It's so important, 100%. In schools, PhDs are desirable and great, and everyone loves that you have it, right? But sometimes there's like are you doing this as a stepping stone, or they just want to make sure, right, that you are committed to teaching or are committed to the school community or anything like that. So everything Anna just said, awesome.
Yeah, I third Anna's point as well. And I think that I didn't have a situation in the interview where I was asked to kind of defend my qualifications and intentions. The most that I was asked was, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And with that question, yeah, I just really genuinely answered it and said, you know, I would love to work this up to more managerial position or more acquisition editor position. So I just sort of fit like my overall goals genuinely to what I saw my career developing at Oxford University Press. So that, you know, I think really clarified to them that I had thought about it. and saw my future career fitting in with, you know, their needs and their opportunities there. I guess I also had an addition to the other question of treatment by others outside, because Oxford University Press technically is part of the University of Oxford, which I also did not know when I applied, but that is the case. So in a weird way, I am kind of a staff member of Oxford, University of Oxford. And genuinely, most of my interactions with authors, so who are faculty members all over the place, have been really, really kind and genuine. They've been really responsive to me reaching out and really haven't mistreated me in any way. There was only one exception, and that was sort of a miscommunication sort of situation where someone felt that things weren't being handled very well, but we resolved it, and it worked out all right. And it wasn't sort of a question of my qualifications sort of not being up to standard. It was other things getting in the way. But genuinely, people I've encountered have been very respectful. I'm only 2 months in, of course, but so far it's been good.
Well, thank you so much. Laura, did you want to chime in as well?
No, I don't. I just wanted to thank you all as well. I think we're at time, certainly, right?
Yes, we're at time. I just dropped in the chat my email, kirstyfrancis@ucla.edu. I am hoping to do another panel like this next year with the GSC. But the way that I found out about folks is through word of mouth, right? Like Laura has suggestions and John, very helpful. And I would love to find nonprofit folks or folks working in other spheres so we can expand even further beyond the academy. But I can't say enough how much I've learned this past hour or so from the four of you. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your journeys with us. I'm blown away. Seriously, thank you. I'm giving you a applause from my house virtually. And folks, if you joined late, this will be recorded. Is recorded and will be up soon on YouTube. So thank you again for joining us, everybody, and have a wonderful rest of your week.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Thank you so much.